You know, folks, it's no secret. I wrote this book called Liberty and Tyranny, and it first came out in March 2009. That's like over 4 years ago. Boy, it doesn't seem that long ago. 1.3 million copies sold. Why am I telling you this? Because it's fascinating. What's amazing to me is nobody at National Review read it. And I can tell you why. There's an article up there right now, Ron Johnson's transformative proposal, and among other things they say, stunningly, according to the Republican deficit projections prepared by Senator Ron Johnson and obtained by National Review Online, the true size of the problem, that is this debt, is staggering and surprised even many of the seasoned budget negotiators involved, that is, budget negotiators between the Senate and the President. Is it $4 trillion? No. Try $106 trillion, the medium estimate. $106 trillion. Even the lowest, extremely conservative estimate comes in at $72 trillion. The highest is over $120 trillion. So I think to myself, in Liberty and Tyranny, over 4 years ago, I did the calculations based on the government's own numbers. And over 4 years ago, it was $67 trillion. On this program, approximately 2 months ago, I indicated that it had grown in 4 years to over $90 trillion. Over $90 trillion. That's current value of unfunded obligations plus the actual fiscal operating debt. Over $90 trillion. Why do these folks at National Review and these other places think I get behind this microphone and condemn what's going on in Washington, D.C., and condemn so many of their friends in the Republican Party for wasting their time promoting counterproductive and, quite frankly, destructive policies when they're not focused on the issues that are going to destroy this nation? So the light bulb goes off over there at NRO when 1.3 million of you are already aware of this, and that's one of the reasons you're so concerned and frustrated about what's going on in Washington, D.C. Now, they're pushing this comprehensive amnesty. Somebody needs to ask the Gang of Eight, well, what happens if one of these illegal aliens, undocumented aliens, I guess we need to call them now undocumented Americans, what happens if they don't learn English? What happens if they don't pay back taxes? What are you going to do to them? You're going to deport them? No, they're not going to deport them. They go back in the shadows, which is another name for 7-Eleven. Now, considering the incredibly irresponsible fiscal policies of one Congress after another and one president after another, tens of trillions of dollars, there's not enough money on the planet to deal with this. What are the Republicans going to do to help control spending? What are they going to do? Well, I looked here at the Associated Press, and I saw this article yesterday. House Speaker John Boehner, he'd be a Republican, by the way, says he will vote for a wide-ranging farm bill headed to the House floor this month, a major boost for the 5-year, $500 billion legislation that stalled in the House last year. Well, the AP's only half right. It's not $500 billion. It's just a couple $2 billion under $1 trillion. And 80% of the nearly $1 trillion farm bill is for food stamps and related programs, having nothing to do with actual agriculture. And this is how they get metropolitan congressmen to vote for this, because of the massive food stamp element in it. Now, as the Heritage Foundation points out, and of course, according to the Republicans on the Gang of Eight, according to Grover Norquist and some of his sinister connections, according to Karl Rove, who we know is who's Mr. Conservative, we're not to listen to the Heritage Foundation anymore. But according to the Heritage Foundation, this is a massive agriculture subsidy that is characterized by its supporters as a safety net for struggling family farms. In fact, most of the taxpayer support is actually pocketed by the well-to-do. In other words, it's redistribution of wealth from the working people in this country to the wealthy people for the most part, including former President Jimmy Carter, the current Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, ironically enough, and the families of members currently serving on the House and Senate Agriculture Committees. Subsidies flowing to the likes of Carter, USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack, and other relatively wealthy farm owners demonstrate just how incoherent the subsidy regime has become. Despite record-high farm income, record-low debt, farm state politicians and agricultural lobbyists insist taxpayers continue to forfeit their earnings to highly successful agricultural enterprises such as Carter's Farms, Inc., of Plains, Georgia. The farm owned by former President Carter and his family collected over $250,000 in subsidies from 1995 through 2012. During the same period, the current Secretary of Agriculture received over $82,000 in USDA benefits for his 592-acre farm. The Undersecretary of the Department of Agriculture, Michael Scuzzi, he owns 20.8% of a farm in Newcastle County, Delaware. And we've lavished over $1 million from 1995 through 2012 on him. There are no farms in Manhattan, but residents there have collected subsidies totaling nearly $9 million in the past 7 years. Recipients include Mark F. Rockefeller. Does that sound familiar? $356,000. And David Rockefeller. $591,000. Yes, the Rockefeller family. You know, Standard Oil, Chase Manhattan Bank, etc. Now, over on the West Coast in Beverly Hills, 90210, the estate of comedian Jack Benny collected $18,000 for a farm in Madera County, California. $142,900 was paid to Mary Ann Mobley, Miss America, in 1959 for a farm in Madison County, Mississippi. These examples are not exceptions, they're the norm. The United States Department of Agriculture's Economic Research Service reports 2/3 of the farms with incomes exceeding $1 million a year received government payments averaging $55,000 in 2011. Meanwhile, just 27% of farms with income less than $100,000 received payments, averaging just $4,420 in 2011. You got that? Now, the top recipient of subsidies is Riceland Foods, Inc., self-described as the world's largest miller and marketer of rice. It collected $554 million between 1995 and 2012. And according to news reports, Riceland reported sales of $1.16 billion during 2011-2012, the fifth consecutive year of billion-plus revenues for the company. And John Boehner has announced his support for this bill. The subsidies collected by large entrepreneurs make it more difficult for small farms to stay in business. The flow of free dollars to big farms increases demand for farmland. See, folks, this is what the immigration bill is all about, too. It's not about you. It's not about what's best for America. These pathetic weasel politicians beating their chests and patting themselves on the back about how humane they are and people need to come out of the shadows. They want people to come out of the shadows so they can drag them into factories on the farms and bring down the price structure. These people aren't altruistic in Congress. The Chamber of Commerce isn't altruistic. The AFL-CIO isn't altruistic. They're self-serving. Members of Congress and their families routinely collect subsidies, too. For example, Linda Lucas, the wife of House Agriculture Committee Chairman Frank Lucas of Oklahoma, collected $40,000 in payments for their farm in Rogers Mill County, Oklahoma. And he has served on the Ag Committee since he was first elected in 1994. Likewise, the Iowa family farm of Senator Charles Grassley has collected almost $1 million in taxpayer subsidies from 1995 through 2012. And the payments have proved irresistible, even to environmental groups that openly criticize the impact of subsidies on land use. For example, the Nature Conservancy. It accumulated a whopping $4,795,000 from 1995 through 2012, despite its own findings that such payments allegedly promote the conversion of natural habitat to cropland, threatening wildlife in the process. The National Audubon Society collected almost $1 million from 1995 through 2012. Everybody's in on the game, folks, except you. John Boehner said yesterday he will support the bloated farm bill, and I just told you we have over $90 trillion in combined fiscal operating and unfunded liability debt. They can't find anywhere to cut, folks. Nowhere. Meanwhile, we're furloughing people in the military. We're slashing the size of the military. or force structure. But look at this. Look at these giveaways, these programs that redistribute wealth. It's just all these pigs at the trough. It's disgusting. This is the tip of the iceberg. I'm only 1/2 of 1/3 of the government, you know, when it comes to stopping the spending and stopping programs and cutting government. But when it comes to spending and expanding, ladies and gentlemen, John Boehner's right there leading the pack. No longer 1/2 of 1/3 of the government. He's the tip of the spear. He's leading the way. Why is the Farm Bill 80% food stamps? At least one senator was pretty blunt about the purpose of the food stamps, just to get the Farm Bill passed, he said. Such a massive program deserves to be considered and debated on its own. Food stamps shouldn't be lumped in with a Farm Bill. Food stamp spending is doubled under the Obama administration. Participation is at historic highs, not just because there's more poor people. And, of course, we're not going to import poor people. No, just rocket scientists come across the border. No, but because they have loosened and expanded the standards so more and more people can apply. Why does the Farm Bill tax Christmas trees? Oh, yes, a House committee added the Obama administration's proposal, a new tax on fresh Christmas trees into the Farm Bill. Didn't see that coming, did you? As Heritage Foundation points out. And why would the Republican Farm Bill, spend 56% more than the last Farm Bill? Well, you tell me. That's your Republican House. That's your John Boehner.